everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Conversations at the End of the World. My name is Anna Gozdecka, and I'm a professor at the Faculty of Law at the University of Helsinki. And my guest today is Associate Professor Sanna Mustasaari, who is an Associate Professor at University of Eastern Finland, also a Faculty of Law. Welcome, Sanna.
Thank you, Dorota. Nice to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you. Sanna has been researching children's rights in particularly migration context, but also in others for quite a long time. And we're here to talk about children's rights. And I think the first thing that just sort of really makes me wonder every time we talk about children, how we are actually talking about children. And I know we've had a conversation about that before. Could you tell us how children are actually talked about today in public discourse? And is it just my impression, or are children often being instrumentalized in public discourse?
Yeah, I think that's a really fascinating and important question. I think you are right about the instrumentalization point. I think one of the things that has always been kind of interesting and intriguing to me is that while we speak about children's rights, we often recognize their rights. We recognize that children are important and we want to protect them. But at the same time, we tend to produce discourses that separate children from their communities and their families. So we place them on a pedestal in a way, and that tends to deny them from full subjectivity. And I
Mm,
think that's the mechanism that enables us to instrumentalize the best interests of the children
mm,
to almost any political goal that we might have. So, for example, trans people's rights are being restricted across the globe and their humanity denied through invoking fears of how children are being seduced to gender diversity or that hormone treatments are likened to opium crisis. The story being that hormones are being offered to children irresponsibly for financial gains
mm,
or to support certain communities,
mm,
or that migrant children were discussed as anchor children sent to West to help families migrate. And this all kind of separates and denies the importance of children's communities. And that has the impact that we're not able to really fully see the children.
mm. Yes, very true. Um, a lot of things are happening around children's rights, I think, at this point in time. So
Mm.
governments are coming up with all kinds of initiatives to protect children. And one of those
Mm.
is, for example, banning or restricting young people's access to social media. Um, what's your take on this? Is it really protecting children, or is it instead reducing their autonomy?
Well, I think it does both. To some extent, protecting children from social media is necessary to support the development of their autonomy,
Mm,
because we do know from several studies that digital environments can be detrimental for children.
mm,
Uh, the cognitive load can be too much, and social media can be harmful to children because it can expose them to risks such as cyberbullying or inappropriate content, online predators, and so on and so forth. And it's also true that it can negatively affect mental health
mm,
by fostering anxiety, depression, low self esteem, constant comparison or pressure to fit in. And it also creates new forms of intimacies that are often non reciprocal.
mm,
And of course, excessive screen time is bad for self regulation and can interfere with sleep and physical activity and real life social interactions, everything that's crucial for healthy development. So, in that sense, I think we need to be aware of all that and we need to do something. But then, what that something is of course, always a tricky question. Because I also think that it's important that we recognize children as individuals and members of their communities. And if communities exist today in digital spaces and online spaces, then making children or banning children from those spaces completely also is a problematic way to address these concerns.
mm,
And if we live in social media, I think one could think that then children are citizens of this society and this environment too. And if we ban them from these spaces, it makes our world even more adult-centered
Mm,
than it already is.
mm,
And of course, this question is connected to the notion of autonomy. Where do we think of autonomy as something that's kind of on-off, or something that you either have or don't have? Whereas we should think of ways to support autonomy, and maybe think of autonomy as something that has several elements, as many feminist relational autonomy theorists have suggested. So thinking of ways to support children's autonomy in social media, I think, is more, and of course adults responsible behavior and regulation in social media is important for that too.
yeah, very good point that, by restricting children, we're creating more and more adult-only spaces. So I actually never thought about that,
Yeah.
but what an important point. Going back to your area and, researching rights of migrant children, what happens when children, such as migrant children, are treated as threats or burdens rather than rights holders, which is what keeps happening all across the globe at the moment? What are the
Mm.
risks that emerge from that approach?
Yeah, I think there are several risks, and I think this is connected to your first question. So if we treat children separately from their communities and families, so even though Aliens Acts and related legislation and court praxis almost universally tends to be committed to protecting the best interest of the child, but that means very little if the children's communities and families are treated as threats and unwanted burdens, um, because then children become associated with that kind of
Yeah,
talk. So it's not separated from other areas of
yeah,
society where we reject certain kinds of people
mm,
and produce hierarchies. Uh, of course, this kind of legislation, for example, family reunification, that causes separation and inflicts harm by making family reunification difficult, results in children becoming migrant children becoming treated as others of this society. And I think that, of course, that the individual cost is enormous for these children, but in the long run, for the whole community, I think we risk producing a new kind of slave society where people have radically different rights and opportunities
mm,
depending on their origins. And ultimately, this, of course, reduces the trust in society and weakens social bonds. So it's, of course, self-evidently unethical, but it's also unsustainable, even though it's often justified
mm.
with, arguments based on
Pragmatic,
economic sustainability. But
yes.
it's actually something that's unsustainable
Mm.
from demographic perspectives and also economic perspectives.
Mm, that's right. That's right. Um, yeah, you've mentioned, I guess, otherized children or children that, are easily marginalized, such as migrant children. Another identity that I can think of that is marginalized is trans children who have become proxies in broader ideological struggles. What
Hmm.
does it say about how seriously we actually take their rights and identities?
Yeah, I think it says a lot about how easily children's rights become hijacked for political purposes far from the children's realities. Of course, there is this idea that gender diverse children would stop being gender diverse if
Mm,
they were not encouraged. And um, there's a shocking resemblance to old prohibitions against
mm,
encouraging to homosexuality that we've had and several countries still have, and some countries are or have reintroduced in their legislations. So this is an example of rather than trying to solve the various challenges that gender diverse children have, for example, the threat of violence or inadequate services, the aim is to ban their existence or some parts of their personality or their humanity and make them disappear. So this is a worrying trend.
Yeah, it is definitely.
Mm.
Oh, and another group of children that I can think of are children that are trapped in conflicts, war conflicts, armed
Mm.
conflicts. How do we make space for children's rights and experiences in those conflicts? Because it seems to me that those experiences are often erased.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think this is a difficult question. You can sort of address it from several perspectives. And I'm now perhaps thinking about the public discussion and discourse and whether we see the experiences of children in these armed conflicts. And I think one important book for me has been your book, actually, on the images and spectacles
Okay.
around these conflicts and around migration and this, because I also think that it takes a lot from the imagery of suffering to truly start to transform policies and make a difference. I think you showed in your book quite well that a lot of things need to happen before it starts mattering.
Mm,
And I think that there's no simple solution to that, but we need to bring the rights of the children up persistently and the atrocities that they face. But also structural changes are necessary. And here again, um, it's the world is not in a very good place at the moment, because political role of international actors should be strong in these kind of conflicts,
mm,
but the contemporary architecture seems to be eroding in that sense.
mm,
So it is difficult. And I think on an everyday level, what we all have and what we all can do in our lives is that we need to foster and cherish practices that breed empathy, and also not just empathy, but kind of a will to understand complicated
mm,
situations and complicated uh, uh, things and even painful experiences. And I think we need art
mm,
and we need ability to listen to the children.
how important.
So,
Yeah. And art is such an important, I guess, vehicle.
mm,
But what I'm at least seeing, even in like art forms, we we're avoiding these complex answers. We're trying to
mm,
simplify them.
mm,
So now when I think of like recent narratives that have emerged, like shows
mm,
like adolescents that have become instant hits, they
yeah.
still treat the issues very much in a black and white manner. So
Yeah.
the cat. But how could we talk about issues like those portrayed in adolescence about radicalization of young boys in a way that doesn't reduce, experiences of children to portraying boys as future threats, because that's what, to me,
Mm,
that show was doing, and I find that quite problematic. How can we talk about it in a more nuanced way?
mm, mm. Yeah, I think you're right. And this of course there is this problem of of black and white, and in order for something to become a hit, you often need something that's kind of easily digestible, where the message is kind of simple enough
Mm,
for masses to, and it doesn't necessarily make you feel um, difficult feelings,
mm,
and that it gives you a simple narrative,
mm,
something that's happening regardless of what you're doing.
mm,
Um, but I think what's really at stake here is that we need to think about and start taking seriously the kind of futures and hope that young men have and boys have, and that this kind of threat is not something that comes from boys
mm,
themselves, but from the hierarchies that make the future seem uh, difficult, or seem something like
Mm,
seem like something that where the boys don't have agency in their lives, where they're not in control of anything.
mm,
And I think that's the product of growing insecurity all over the world, and this kind of sense of defeat and meaninglessness, and this feeling of being ridiculed, that
mm,
something, this kind of recognition is taken away from you.
mm,
And again, I mean, there are no easy solutions, but I think a culture of of connection, or and art there too, different ways of maybe continuing the discussion from shows like Adolescence,
mm,
to show different interpretations of what's behind
mm.
these kinds of bursts of violence, and ability to listen is something that's crucial in
Yeah,
our societies today.
continuing the conversation, in other words, I guess,
Hmm.
through different means.
Yeah, yeah,
Very important. Um, what do you think would need to happen so that we could genuinely listen to children and young people, not just as future adults, but as people living and thinking in the now? Because we seem to kind of, I guess, ignore the experiences of children now. We always project
yeah.
uh, the future onto the children. So how can we listen to children and
Hmm.
genuinely appreciate their experiences?
And that, again, a huge, huge and important question. And, how is listening to anyone possible ever? But I think we definitely need to try. And for children, their, future is always present in
Mm,
their now. It's always something that's there. It's relevant for understanding children's experiences and childhood, because children develop so quickly. But then the focus should be on making societal spaces accessible and welcoming to children as they are now, where they can exist and grow and communicate as members of communities, not just as future workers or value adders.
yeah.
So maybe more connection there too is what's needed for the listening to be truly possible.
Mm,
And I think there now in Finland we're cutting access to art from
mm,
children who are not uh, who don't belong to the most economically well-doing
mm,
families.
mm,
So that's of course something that cuts out possibilities and cuts out
yeah.
futures and world making, because I think hope and future and the here and now is also about abilities to produce time, to be able to see that what I'm doing is important, that I'm regarded as someone
Mm,
in this community, and my experiences are important.
mm,
So this kind of access to self-expression and presence and validation is of course something that's needed for a connection and listening, to be able for us to be able to listen to children, and also children to be able to listen to themselves, because that's also something that if we cut possibilities of connecting, then we're not giving children opportunities to become people who can listen
mm.
to others.
Absolutely. I think very important. I think I really love how you've emphasized, the fact that kind of we're really not including children in all spaces. That, children continue to
Hmm.
be kind of almost like an afterthought, at least, in many
Yeah,
contexts.
yeah,
While what we should do is including them and having them really and truly participate as people who are here now and
yeah,
whose
yeah.
voices are also important in how we do talk about children. And it seems to be so hard now, just looking at what's happening with the Epstein files. We all of the sudden, have conversations
Mm,
of,
mm,
who children even are, and whether we should protect children who are 15 years old or not. So
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
instrumentalization of children is so omnipresent
yeah.
and continues in all kinds of spaces. Thank you so much, Sanna, for this. I think really important insights, and we can only hope that we can have and preserve those spaces, preserve art spaces, preserve participation spaces. Because if we do erase children from that, then I'm not quite sure whether we can actually preserve talking about their rights in any kind of meaningful way. Thank you so
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Thank you so much, and thank you to our listeners. If you're enjoying these conversations, please subscribe so we can, beat the algorithm, how I always call it. Because of course, small channels are not prioritized by any algorithms, so it really helps us hugely. Thank you so much, Sanna, for finding the time. And I guess our message for everyone is like, let's include children in the spaces where their voices.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you, Dorota, for the podcast series. I think it's really important, and I'm happy to be part of it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for participating. And I agree, we need to keep talking, keeping conversation going is really important. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for watching today's episode. Thank you and bye.